Right, let's get going with this dent on these rear caddy doors. So, as you can see, just taping off the glass to protect that before we start sanding or DAing or grinding, as Reese is doing here. So just got to remove that paint to expose all that metal. We did have a look inside the door, see what access was there from the back, and whilst there was a little bit, there was nothing strong enough to be able to actually lever off the back. So we're going to have to pull it from the front like we normally do. Right, now that paint's all off, just setting up the slide hammer attachment on the flatliner here. So no need for any keys or wiggly wire on this one. It's a fairly easy panel to pull in this section as well. So we'll just slide hammer that main dent out, then a little bit of hammer forming whilst holding areas out with the slide hammer should get it locked in place nicely. So you'll just see Reese here just tapping his earth on the panel, which fuses the slide hammer onto the panel, allows him just to slide hammer backwards and pull that main dent out. It's important to note here as well just how much force he isn't having to use. You don't have to go, wailing at this panel. In this area, it's not immensely strong to the point where you're going to have to really beat it and cause a load of high spots and stretching. So he's just working back and forth across the dent, pulling each low spot in turn and lifting the panel out so that we get 90% in the metal, and then we'll finish that off with a skimmer filler. So here's some of that hammer forming I was talking about then. So he's basically just attaching the slide hammer to the panel, leaning back to stretch that metal out, and then using the hammer around just to work down those low spots and lift any last bits of lows. There's a little low there by the hinge as well now that he's just going to lift up. And then work backwards just into the main dented area a little bit as well, just to even that out and set the metal nicely. So what Reese is doing now is just taking the body file, he's running it over that area where his panel pulled, just to basically file out any highs. It's not so much a material removal procedure, it's just to indicate whether there's any areas that are overly high that he's going to need to work down before he carries on and gets filler in this panel. But he's switched over to his DA now, so he can just prep around the edges, make sure everything's scuffed up nicely to receive that filler. Right, time to blow off all that dust from the paint removal stage and get this thing cleaned up now so we can get some filler in it. So a good blow off with the airline and a good solvent panel wipe over just to clean everything out, make sure there's not any dirt or anything there to affect the filler and cause pinholes or anything like that, or to contaminate the filler. So here we go, the filler mixing time. Reese has got his onion board there, mixing up his filler ready for this area. He's trying out a new filler today actually, which is from E-Tech, and it's their advanced body filler. So, as always with filler, mixing ratio 50:1, so golf ball to a pea, making sure that you don't have any streaks of hard nut or red left in there once it's all mixed and it's one nice uniform colour. Good old Reese there, just adjusting the camera angle so we've got a little bit of a better view now as he skims the filler in. And you'll see it's important to remember when you're laying filler into a panel like this, you want a nice long stroke on the filler so you can pull all that filler off the spreader itself, and you want light even pressure in order to not drag the filler from one end of the repair to the other. If the pressure's too heavy, all you'll do is drag it all to one end, and then you'll have a huge hump of filler you've got to try and sand down before you get anywhere near the correct level. So as you can see there, Reese is scooping it up, and then he just uses a nice long stroke and even pressure just to drag that all the way across the dent and fill up any of those low spots. Once most of the filler's loaded in like that, you'll see he's just passing back over that, and that's just in order to get the surface as smooth as he possibly can. So the smoother the surface of the filler, the less sanding you're going to have to do to level it and get it right on the panel. And the less sanding you've got to do, the less chance you've got of putting ridges, ripples and all that kind of stuff in it, and basically making it a nightmare to sand and get that perfect repair on. So by going over that a number of times before it kind of starts setting up and dragging, just means that you get the best surface area possible and the best surface finish possible. And also just here now, you'll see when he comes to the end of this skim, he just swipes the spreader down the edge, and that's just feathering out that edge to kind of taper it off into the panel rather than leaving a big, heavy, hard edge on it. Here we go then, fill it in. It's been lamped, so it's dry now, it's ready for sanding. Reece is just gonna glove up and get ready. And he'll have his dust extractor on with his hose on the block, and he just shows his 80 grit strip there that he's gonna start off with. So we always rip the top off, fill it with an 80 just to get that initial shape and sort of speed it up a little bit. And now he's just going in with some guide coat. And this particular guide coat is a dry guide coat, so it's not like an aerosol. And it is just essentially like a charcoal type dust that you wipe over your filler. It's non-clogging on the sandpaper, but it is perfect for indicating your highs and lows. You'll see a lot of metal workers using something similar, like they use like a metal worker's blue-in solution, and that just goes over the metal and does the same job. This just does it for body filler, so essentially you can see those lows, you can see if there's any major lows, so rather than sand too far and cause a huge dish, you can then fill over and level up those lows. So after rubbing that down, there's a couple of little high spots, as you can see. Reece is just working those down with the hammer now. Normal to get those around that hinge area when you're pulling, because that part is sort of really strong and it tends to move right underneath the pulling pin, as opposed to like lifting the whole area like the rest of the dent. So he's just taking those down, and they only need to go down a little bit, hence why he's just using the panel hammer just to get those down, roughly ready for another skim. On with the next skim now then. This is our UPOL Fantastic. It's a great all-round filler. You can use this for sort of deep fills, medium fills. You can finish with it. It has a real nice lightweight quality to it, and a real nice spreading consistency as well. So Reece is finishing mixing that up. He's essentially now, he's knocked down those high spots, so he's putting a nice skim over just to cover any of those which will now be little low spots, and then take out any pinholes in the original filler or anything like that. Okay, this skim is dried and lamped up, so back on with the guide coat now, and just as we did before, we'll start flattening it down with the block. And if you pay attention to the way Reece is moving the block here, you'll see he's going in kind of an X pattern. So rather than going straight along the panel or straight up and down, which usually is going to pick up any low spots and sort of force the block into them and cause ripples, if you go in an X pattern, it follows all the contours of the panel, because we've got like a roll around and a roll from top to bottom. So we need to make sure we're following those contours just in order to get it nice and flat and true. So onto our final finishing skim then. And we use UPOL Dolphin glaze for this. We have tried tons of different finishing glazes, and by far this is the best out there as far as we're concerned for what we use it for. We always get great results with it. It's really, really nice and self-leveling, easy to spread. You get barely any pinholes with it, if any at all, and it just makes a real nice smooth finish. You can go over that with a 320 and finish it off, and you are ready for primer. Next stage naturally then is primer. So that was all blocked off, nice and finished up, and then masked off, and you can see primer's on. Reece has now got a interface pad on his block, which is like a soft spongy pad with a 320 grit on, and he's just leveling out that primer and feathering out those edges, ready for the painting stage. So just like in the filler stages, we use a guide coat on the primer, because it normally goes on with a bit of a natural orange peel, and then any sanding scratches left from the filler stages, it's really easy to see them, and we're able to remove them at this point rather than seeing them in the finished product, then seeing them in the paint, which is just horrible. So the guide coat really comes into its own in these stages. So the bit we've all been waiting for then, it's masking time, getting it ready for paint. You can see Rhys is just making sure he masks off all those edges, seals them in nicely so we don't get any overspray trapping inside the doors or anything like that. Masking off the windows the same, because they are bonded in, customer didn't want them removing, so we're going to mask around them and paint around. Okay, so bagging's over the car now, we're all sealed and masked. You can see Rhys is laying down his base coat now, just blending over those primary areas and feathering it out throughout the rest of the panels. So we get that nice seamless paint job and it blends nicely into everything else. So just getting around the edges now with that heat gun to make sure any paint that's crept into those window crevices is nice and dry, because if you lacquer over that when it's wet, you're just going to cause a nightmare and create a peeling edge. So we make sure that all that paint in there is dried out, ready to go for clear coat. Okay, so the fun bit then, here I am just tack ragging off any last bits of dirt and debris from this painted surface. So the base coat, as you can see, we use water base, it dries matte, and then obviously we put a clear over it. So the paint system is known as clear over base. And I'm just going around now, the tack rag is the last line of defense between, you know, getting a nice finish in that job and having it absolutely full of dirt, nibs and rubbish and having a huge polishing job on our hands. So I like to take my time, make sure I get around all of the panel with that. And then I'll just go and put the tack rag away. And you'll see what we're going to do. We're going to go on with a light coat of clear first. So we're going to do sort of a grip and rip, as we call it in the trade. It's like a light grip coat, and then we go over with a full coat then. So the first one will be closed. It won't be a dust coat or anything like that, but it will just basically be a very light coat, you know, as little amount of microns as we can get on, just to make sure that as that flashes, we get a good grip, and then we can put the full finish coat and full film thickness over at the end. Right then, second and final coat time. You can see now this is the one where we go for the money shot, we go for the gloss. So you'll see speed going across the panels is reduced slightly, so I'm a little bit slower. That's just to make sure I get more material on and get a nicer flow out on there as well. With it being black, you know, if we can match the factory peel but then reduce the polishing time, that's exactly what we look for. So first door done, let's get across onto that larger door then. And you can see, rather than stop exactly at the edge of the panel in the middle where the doors join, on both passes I flow over into the next door just to make sure we don't get a heavy build-up in that area, because edges of panels love to form a run, and that's the last thing you want on an edge, because it's the easiest place you can break through when you are flattening and polishing. So I've got a little bit of clear left in the gun. Looking over it, I know I can get another nice coat over that just to make everything flow out as well. Didn't quite go as heavy as I wanted to on the second coat, so even more material on there means better protection as well, better UV resistance, and even cleaner and flatter job at the end of it. So here then I'm just tackling those blend areas. So where we blended at the top of the doors there, all we do is we have to sort of peel that bagging back and retract it. We have to get some fade out thinner on, and then just tease that lacquer into the fade out thinner to create a seamless blend, so that when we polish it out, that's invisible. There's no sign of a repair or a blend there. So this is where I'll just gently put that lacquer in up to that blend point. As you can see there, just a nice little drop coat over that. Nothing too heavy, you don't want to go crazy because the fade out thinners can run it. I just give it a little bit of warmth to make sure it's really tacky with the heat gun. And then final step, then you'll just see me dusting in the fade out thinner now, just making sure all that masking's out the way, because the last thing you want is for it to drop down and stick to that wet clear that's there. So we're just dropping the fade out thinner, start that off warming up with the heat gun so it starts to flash off, and it just pulls that lacquer in nicely and creates a nice sturdy blend. Okay, so for whatever reason, the camera decided not to record in the flatting stages before we polished this job. But to give you a rundown of what we did, we used our Sear Air discs, which are sponge-backed wet flatting discs, and we used a 1500, 2000, and then we switched to our 3M Trizact disc, which is a 3000, just to finish it off. Rhys will have used a 6000 in certain areas on this as well, anywhere he had to go slightly heavier with the 1500 or 2000, and that just conditions that surface perfectly to get the compound on, get our gloss back, and then we can finish it off with a final buffing compound to get that full gloss. So just using one of our buffing microfibers then to take off all that polish residue so we can see exactly where we are. Make sure there's no dull spots, any wet flatting scratches from the sanding stages or anything like that, because that's what we like to finish off at this point. Make sure that we've not left anything behind, because if the customer sees it, it always just takes the shine off a little bit, excuse the pun. So we've got this little battery operated pistol polisher here. We actually got that from TikTok shop, and it's really, really good for using on edges and things like that. We didn't think we'd have a place for it in the professional environment, but it's fantastic for things like this. You can see Rhys just going across that top edge underneath the window, just where it's always a bit more difficult to polish there with the full-size polisher. It's a bit more hefty, it's an edge, so you don't really want to hang around there too much, so this little thing makes it a breeze. And then back to the buffing microfiber just to make sure we get all that polish residue off and we can see exactly where we are. Those microfibers as well, we will link in the description for you, so you can go and buy some if you want to or need to. Along with everything else we've used in the video, we'll link the flatting papers, the wet flatting papers, the polish, the heads, everything. So if you want to do this sort of job at home, you can. So we'll get this bagging off then, get it demasked, give it a clean down, get it outside, and it'll be ready to go for the customer to pick up. So here we are then, the van's now outside, it's polished. Rhys is just giving it a final wipe down to make sure any dust and polish residue is removed so that that's ready to go for the customer, and it's another one knocked out, ready for the customer to collect, back as good as new. If you like what you see here folks, subscribe to our channel for more of this content.